And yeah, I started following you in New Zealand many years ago, and I resonated quite a lot with what you are talking about, the access to talent. Even though we are in the recruitment industry, how we get access to talent, how we, for our customers, we get those people that are professionals. You are quite into medtech. They're all professionals. They're hard to find, hard to engage with if you are not giving any value proposition to them. If you are not adding any value to them, why they would be talking to you? And something I really wanted, I follow you on LinkedIn, as I said, and I follow all the things you do with different people when you are talking about different topics, trajectory on the career of the professional, and many other things. And something I really wanted to discuss with you is, how do you help companies understand what it is that they need? And the reason why I'm asking this is because jobs are getting more complex. Like with technology, there are a lot of things that are being done by AI or other kind of technology to solve certain problems that in the past you required to have the skill, the knowledge, and many other things. Nowadays, many of those things are solved by technology. So the skills that are needed to solve the problems that humans can solve require human skills. So the jobs are becoming more complex. And one of the things that I see is that companies, many of them, not all of them, still define the job descriptions in a traditional way, that it's like, okay, let's find the job title. And it's not even a conscious process of thinking, okay, what problems I need to solve, who or what role could be solving these problems, and how. So the main question I had for you was, how do you help your customers in this sense? Or how do you go even for your own hiring, for your own team, defining what's the role that would be solving those problems?
So Santi, it's a good question, and it's a very complex question, right? Because it's neither black or white, on or off. I think right now we're in a time where certainly some of the knowledge-based career selections, we can start to see a hint that they might be at risk, right? Historically, we would reward people who either could memorize certain things or had something that could not be done as well by an algorithm or a computer or AI as before. There's a emerging profile that I think the market's going to start to see. It's going to be somebody who's able to aggregate experts, human beings, using AI and machine learning data, and be able to aggregate that as a person who can look at all of the information coming in and then have the ability to make a decision on all that data coming in. And that person's temperament, Santi, is going to be very important. The temperament that is going to be able to collaborate, transition people from a human-based, knowledge-based economy and workplace to one of which it's a cobot, where it's a human with an AI, with a chat GPT, with algorithms, and then blending those together. I don't think we're there yet, but I think you and I can see that environment coming rapidly in certain areas. I would say in law, I would say in certain parts of science, where a machine is able to process numbers or retrieve data, where a person being in the middle isn't critical until that data set is in hand, and then a decision what to do with that data set is going to be a valuable skill set and temperament of an individual.
And something that, like, we are both in the recruitment industry, and something I see is how do you assess those skills, those human skills, from a resume? how do you assess how people understand how to communicate? Because in the until now, and it's still happening today, but I now see how companies have a hard time to identify the people they need through a resume. And part of the reason it's because I believe that people went to college, they finish college, graduates, they look for a job based on what they have studied. Then they work at a company for 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 years, and they have that recognition of working at that specific company and a specific job, that it was very clear by reading the job title. And then if they wanted to change jobs, like college, previous company, and job title was quite a thing to make a decision to see if it was worth to call that person to an interview. But nowadays, all the human skills that are needed are very hard to find in a resume, and also are very hard for people to elaborate when they have to communicate what it is that they can do to add value to a team, to a company. And that's another aspect that I see quite a bit. Most people, not everyone, of course, most people are not ready to explain how they add value to a team, in order to add value to the company, in order to the company add value to the customers, in order to get paid, to do that transaction of I give you something of value and you give me money. People are more used to say, well, I went to this college, I have this many years of experience doing this and that, and these are my achievements. But they haven't been prepared to elaborate all this process. So that's a problem, because not everyone can elaborate this. So when companies receive all the applications of their resumes, it's very hard to identify who should I be calling. If it's executives, of course, you don't have that amount of applications and probably you go out there to find the people. But with other jobs that are going through applications or even through hunting on different portals, how do you recognize it? Is that something you are seeing as well, or not really?
You bring up a critical point that we're in the midst of right now in the talent access world. And so until now, for the most part, just think about I've been at this for 32 years and you've been at it long enough as well. We used to not have access to resumes. Let's go back to the days of Monster. The only resumes on Monster were unemployed people. And then LinkedIn came and some sort of event made it okay for somebody who is employed to now post their background on LinkedIn. So that changed the game altogether. That almost made a recruiter's database inconsequential at this point in time, where the highest value was a recruiter's database. So now you're able to put out in the public domain how you want to represent yourself. So now the buyer, meaning, and I should say the buyer is both the individual as well as the company, but now the company can go out and say, all right, I'm going to go on LinkedIn. I want to find everybody who's worked at, just say for argument's sake, because everybody will know the brand, Apple, and somebody who is a software engineer at Apple, and somebody who had a good undergrad pedigree. And to your point, great. Those generally would represent a reasonable vetting process, that somebody has evidence base that they made it through these 3 tests in their life. Now, certainly somebody was at the bottom of that class and the top of that class when they graduated from that university. And then somebody at Apple was, in relative terms, the lowest performer and the highest performer in relative terms. And then the interview process happens. And if you think about the buying decision that's made in an interview, it's almost like going on, and I don't know if you're married and it doesn't matter for this conversation, but it's almost like we're going to go on 2 dates and we're going to bet on each other and become married for a certain amount of time. That could be a good vetting process. Ideally, I think if you tracked it down longitudinally. So if you're a really good interviewer, and if you've been in search before, Santi, you know this, we have had people go in who on paper were okay, but came out of the interview and the client said, you know what, they don't have the exact skills we wanted, but God, do they fit our culture here? And then the other side, we've thrown a dart, meaning exact examples, exact undergrad, right? Exact skill sets. But in the interview, based on accumulation of maybe 3 hours, they say, well, we're not sure they really fit in that very small moment in time. And so those are two examples of bad decisions waiting to be made longitudinally in the interview process. Because some people are good interviewers, some people are not. And then what I would add to that is, to date, the calling card of most people is their online presence, their LinkedIn profile, and then ultimately, because the LinkedIn profile precedes the resume generally. So LinkedIn profile, they get contacted, please send us a resume. Resume goes in. Then what I believe is coming is a resume and then a certified temperament disposition of what the person's personality is, what their collaboration style is, what their communication style is. I see the elite organizations who had done those assessments in the past now become a proactive marketing piece with a resume and a LinkedIn profile tied to a person's own personal sort of video presentation, because individuals now are getting more sophisticated, and I don't want to know who I have to be to work at your company. This is who I am. Would I fit your culture? And that is a shift that's occurring in the workplace.
I completely agree. And I think that's part of what make it like every time a recruitment process starts is the company is trying to show the best version of themselves, and the professional is trying to show the best version of themselves. And sometimes the best version, it's not necessarily who they are on daily basis. Most of the time, the best version is who they are not, like what they are not are in their on daily basis. And we see companies sometimes when they are creating these jobs, offering a job that would be the ideal job, but not maybe the real job and the real problems that they need to solve. And the person, again, shows the ideal person or what they would want to, what they can do now, but because they want to do something else in the future. So there's a book my father shared with me. It's from Elliot Jacks that talks about, it's called Human Capabilities. And it talks about the capabilities that each human being has, and that it's a mix of values, capability to do the job, current capability to do the job, but then skills and experience, like knowing how to do it. And these three aspects, for me, one of the most important ones is the value one. And the values means wanting to do the job that has to be done today, not the one that you will be able to do in 6 months' time once you have done a lot of different things, but the job that you have to do today. And that what you have just mentioned about the person and the company, that they are that they're not showing they're not showing who they really are because they want the job. And this switch that you're mentioning, where it's like, this is me, these are my skills, these are my values. It's something that fit with your culture. I think it's gonna be a big thing. And again, with professionals that they are highly qualified, knowing how to leverage technology, having the human skills in order to be able to influence, to be able to have critical thinking, to continuously adapt, because who knows how the work would look like in 1 year time. So yeah, those are things I'm seeing. And my question is how the hiring process needs to change, and if it will change eventually.
What the hiring process should be, and what it is, I think in part, what it is built on defense and fear, because depending on where you live in the world, it's a very litigious environment. And it would be to everybody's benefit. Here, let me give you an example here in the US, in certain states in the US. You might be aware of this. In certain states, you're not allowed to ask what somebody's compensation is while you're interviewing them. The only thing that should matter according to the law is what the compensation range is for the role the person's interviewing for. You and I, as experienced headhunters, know that if I know an individual's compensation, I can save a lot of time for everybody involved, that I'm not going to waste or run people through a process that at least I know a baseline. I'm not going to discriminate against you because your compensation. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a baseline in the beginning. And along the way, if you're short-sighted enough, look, if we're way off on compensation, we shouldn't be talking to each other. But if it's a difference of a few $1,000s, and somebody who's interviewing for a $120,000 a year job shouldn't be making $76,000, at least in the professional levels. We know there's probably a 5 to 12% difference. But if I know early on in, and you as an individual candidate aren't thoughtful enough to check out the opportunity, see how it will build your skill sets, see how it increases your value in the future, see what network you'll get involved in. But if your only point of apply or not apply is exclusively the compensation, you're probably very short-sighted. But because of the litigious environment that we're in parts of the United States, that's just one example of quote-unquote playing defense and safety that has been put upon the employment sector by people who don't really understand the dynamics. I know it's there to protect certain job categories. I understand that. But at large, in the professional environment, if you start to put data that you will not allow an individual to share with you, you're going to start to get a false front on candidates. They're going to represent who they think you want them to be. And then after they're on board, all the parties are going to be sort of disappointed. So there's a couple challenges current day, and there's a couple challenges I see on the horizon. Current day, for the most part, if you think about a hiring process, the hiring process gets put to HR. HR is not talent access or talent evaluation. What they do is they have certain parameters that they know should be go or no go in regards to resumes. So that's number one. And then they're the screening process that decides who gets to see what next. And they're overworked, under-resourced, and not really talent access evaluation, because it's all being based upon a two-dimensional paper. So that's number one. And then you go downrange to what potentially is happening, and I hear people talking about it often enough, is, well, AI is going to be able to read resumes, read skills, et cetera, et cetera. Well, first of all, that is way off in the future for a number of reasons. Is that the way that data represents itself is undisciplined and messy. So you're not going to be able to use that data set appropriately, nor train a data set. And here's the other side. If you train a data set, and I'm being very sort of gross here with my statement, if you train a data set for inclusion or exclusion, what you're doing is you're statistically saying what statistically fits a hire here. And when you statistically do that, you're going to get somebody who's pretty much right down the middle. The people who change the world are on the fringes. And so you're going to exclude fringe performers because that either algorithm's going to be biased, or going back to the original example I gave you, the analog human being is going to be biased. Because as human beings, what we do is we see somebody for the first time, and I have an immediate reaction of like or dislike at different levels. And then what do? I spend the entire session justifying that initial feeling on a person. Where my guidance to my client partners is, I neither want you to like or dislike this person in the first 15 minutes of talking to them, because otherwise you're going to be biased. And that's what eventually AI in the initial screening process is going to end up giving us a very down the middle selection, and we're going to miss the fringe performers who change the world.
I completely agree. And I have heard you before saying this, so it's kind of like, in live. And it's nicer to listen to you live. I completely agree. I completely agree with the data we have is not the data we need. And I believe, again, it's because people are not well prepared to elaborate on how they can provide value. So resumes are not good enough in order to rely on that data. And the same on the other side with job descriptions, because again, HR is there to support the business, but it's not access to talent access. So when it comes to talk to the different lines of business, they don't necessarily talk the same language. They speak different languages. And I have been doing a bit of research, very high-level research on how engineers or technology departments want to communicate what it is that they need to HR. And HR wants to be communicated in a different way. And then that makes people not wanting to do a proper job description. A job description, when I talk to people, it's like, this document that we have to do, and probably HR should be doing it. Maybe an intern in HR should be doing it. I just need to have the people in front of me to see who I like or dislike in order to bring on board. And something I'm working on now, and I don't know if it's worth or not, but something I'm working on now is how we make them communicate, how HR can talk their own language, and how tech people can talk their own language in order to understand what it's needed. Because then we start in this, apart from law in each state, what are you able to ask or not? I agree with what you just said, that we bring a lot of people to the conversation and we are wasting everyone's time. Some things are because of the law, but many other things, and I would say most of the things, is because people are not sitting down to efficiently address what problems need to be solved and what person will be able to, what skills, knowledge, capabilities, values that person needs to have in order to solve those problems, and how we are going to assess those candidates in the hiring process.
Yeah, you just described the book that was written, I don't know, maybe 2 decades ago, when you described HR's challenge in translating what marketing or sales or even worse, engineering wants, right? It was a book called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And so they lived in the same house. They were trying to say the same thing, or they think they were, but the way it came out and the intention and the interpretation were entirely, almost opposed, because we're not talking the same language or interpreting the words the same way. And so that's what happens oftentimes in the hiring process. If you look how convoluted it is today, generally, to your point, it's a cut and paste of an old job description. I can't tell you how many clients of mine said, I've got a VP of Reg and Qual. Could you send me a couple job descriptions that I can look at and put them together? I said, sure, be happy to, but I'm not sure those were intended to solve the problem that you have, but let's go for it. And then that gets given to HR. HR sends that out. HR is not a subject matter expert on the interpretation of the people who are leaning in for the opportunity, yet they're making the frontline decision on who eventually makes it to the hiring manager. And then both parties are ill-equipped to interview and to be interviewed. So the process itself, I don't mean it to be a commercial, but when you get yourself a partnership with a great search firm, HR especially, is we are allies. We understand you have a very hard job to do, probably one of the hardest job in a corporation today. And if partnered with appropriately, we can make everybody's life easier. And I also think that search in general could change their pricing dramatically and offer even greater value if they weren't having to, for the most part, play Russian roulette with every search that they're on. So, if you're a contingency recruiter, and I'm not saying they're better or worse than retainer, You are playing Russian roulette with every search. So therefore, you've got to play the numbers. How much care can you put into every search with proper screening, proper qualifying, proper selling of the opportunity to the marketplace, right? Are you able to build that client's hiring brand? Are you able to spend the time and really have long conversations with individuals and then nurture them over time on behalf of the client, months at a time in advance when a client says, you know what, in Q2 of 2024, I'm going to need a director of quality. Say, great, we're in October 1st of 2023. I'm going to go out right now for the next 6 months and start nurturing who I think are best in class. Because I know guaranteed you're going to pay me in Q2 of 2024. I'm going to make that investment. And I'm going to give you the best person over the next 6 months, not over 30 days, because I have 5 other searches I have to bet on. So the whole dynamics of the search environment is so misaligned that it's no wonder that you have retention issues, whether you're hiring through search or you're hiring off the street.
It's interesting how sometimes people, as I said, I'm from Argentina, moved to New Zealand, and now I'm in the States. We work with Australia as well. We work with some UK companies as well. And people sometimes ask me, do you guys have this problem in America? Or do you guys have this problem in Argentina? It's like, it's the same everywhere. It's exactly the same problem. Doesn't matter where you are, exactly the same problem. So interesting. Anyway, Joe, I really want to thank you for having the time. It was a pleasure talking to you, listening to you. Again, I have been listening to you for many years now, but talking to you face to face, it has been amazing. I'm taking a lot of what you have shared. That it's very nice to be listening from someone that has been way more years than me in the industry. And very aligned. And I don't know if it's that I'm aligned or if it's that I have been listening from you.
It's common sense. It's right. It really is. It's very common. I'm not spouting anything that is mind bending. I just maybe can articulate it in a way that if you have common sense and business sense at all, you're like, well, yeah.
Yes, it makes sense. But for me, it's crazy. It's still, it's like I have been in this for 15 years. Well, HR, then search and recruitment. And I have been in this in 15 years. And I still, it still blows my mind when I talk to people and they just, no, just put people in front of me and I will know who is the right person. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that. Common sense, but I don't know. I don't know if everyone has it. Joe, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Santi, take care. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.